He's worked with such athletes as Johny Hendricks, Vito Belfort, Charles Sonnen, Jake Ellenberger, Michael Bisping, and was most recently in Melbourne to help Ronda Rousey for a UFC 193 fight. It's a pleasure to welcome Mike Dolce to Submission Radio. Mike, welcome to the program.
Thank you, guys. Big fan of the show. So happy to be here.
Hey, we're fans of your work, so it's great to finally have you on. Obviously, you were here in the country for UFC 193. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but just give us your opening thoughts. What did you think of your time, or what did you think of Melbourne in general?
This was my fifth time in Australia, actually, and my first time in Melbourne. And I got to tell you, it reminded me a lot of New York City in a good way. Being from New Jersey here, east coast of the United States, I have an affinity for more of the blue-collar cities. And Melbourne, great people, amazing coffee. It was nice to just have a nice walk around the city every day and just kind of breathe the air and interact. You guys treated us extremely well out there.
Let us know, because we've sort of, here in Melbourne, it's almost like an ongoing joke where there's a cafe for every single resident here, or every person in the country. How good is the coffee compared to other places like in say, the States?
I think in general, the coffee was good everywhere I went to in Melbourne. Now, in the States, you can get excellent coffee also, but not everywhere. Everywhere I went in Melbourne, I got an amazing cup of coffee. The barista knew exactly where the beans came from, what temperature they should be prepared at, all the specialty drinks. So it was really a nice experience. And it's a coffee culture. You look around the cafes, everybody's in there sipping on their flat whites and, all the other little things that we were learning as we were there.
Yeah, it's definitely entrenched in the Melbourne culture here. Now, speaking of the country, Mike, it's a beautiful country and we love it, but there's a real problem with obesity here in Australia. Now, a recent study by Lancet showed that over a quarter of the country's children and 63% of the adult population is overweight. In another study, it was forecast that if the current upward trends in overweight obesity continue, there will be approximately 1.75 million deaths at the age of 20 plus. Each Australian aged between 20 and 74 who dies from obesity in 2011 to 2050 will lose on average 12 years of life before the age of 75. Let me ask you, what are your thoughts on these shocking statistics?
We've been wrapped around these statistics now for the past decade or so inside my business, and longevity is the foundation of the Dolce Diet program. Most people don't realize that because we work with so many high-level athletes. They associate us with sports performance. Well, that's quite the opposite, really, of who we are as a brand. Our core culture is wrapped around longevity science. When we work with a Ronda Rousey or a Carlos Condit, our goal is for them to be 120 years old, showing their great-grandchildren photos of when they won the UFC world title, in their late 20s, early 30s and such. So we kind of use the short-term sports performance and the physical cosmetic aspect of healthy eating as the Trojan horse to really change the lifestyle and the habits of our clients. We also use the platform afforded to us from the association with these athletes to speak about the importance of proper nutrition, of eating real food or what we call earth-grown nutrients, of avoiding all the processed food-like products out there, and I won't even call these things food, to avoid the external influences that really have a serious damage on our health and wellness. And the stats that you're telling me right now are very similar to those of us here in the United States. I think we always kind of battle for who's worst, who's more obese, who's going to die earliest. Here in the United States, 2 out of 3 Americans will die of a lifestyle-related illness, as says the Center for Disease Control. Now, that stat is staggering, because not too long ago, a little over a decade ago, that number was, quote, only 1 out of 2 people. So our death rate is exponentially increasing. But so is the profit line of pharmaceutical companies, medical and health profession, the supplement industry. So all these companies and industries that are supposed to be supporting our health are actually making massive profit while the average citizen is dying at an alarming rate. This is scary stuff.
Well, explain this to us, because I don't understand. I mean, me and Casper have spoken about this before. Why are the statistics going up? Why is it now in 2015 it's getting worse and worse. What was it from the 90s and the 80s and the 70s and the 60s and the 50s that made it a little bit less? And why is it increasing more and more? Is it to do with the food? Is it to do with the lack of exercise? What's going on, Mike?
I believe it's all of the above. It's the changing of the culture. Part of it is the instant gratification. You can just drive into a McDonald's really in any first world country, and you can get a made to serve dinner. You can get a Big Mac, French fries, chicken nuggets, big old soda, shake on the side, little apple pie dessert for under $10 or so. You can feed your family and drive away. Well, in this day and age, those food-like products are not being produced with your health in mind. Those food products are being produced with a profit and loss statement in mind, and people's jobs and investors' greed is really the reason why these foods are positioned the way that they are, and why these products are marketed the way they are. On my Instagram account, I just posted a photo of Kellogg's. Their new marketing campaign is on a box of Frosted Flakes, where now they're saying Frosted Flakes now come with, quote, energy clusters.
So sugar?
Well, what are these energy clusters? It's simply sugar. They also promote the fact that each serving of Frosted Flakes has 9 grams of protein when added with a cup of skim milk. So 5 grams of protein from the Frosted Flakes, 4 grams of protein from the skim milk. They do not promote the fact that you're getting nearly 60 grams of carbohydrate per same serving and almost 30 grams of sugar per same serving with 1 gram of fiber, which is absolutely ridiculous. So they're really trying to manipulate the public. They're manipulating the media. They're manipulating the marketing to try and trick families into believing that these food-like products are healthy and should be given to children. Now we take it a step further. Parents in the 20, 30, 40-year-old age group are now feeding their children these food-like products that have a nasty and negative health effect, which you can see, as your stat reports, that nearly a quarter of the children now are considered obese. Very similar stat over here in the United States. Also, there are more children now being diagnosed with diabetes here in the United States than at any other time in recorded history. Well, why is that? These are lifestyle-related decisions. These are lifestyle-related diseases that are basically a choice. Now, what we're doing here at the Dolce Diet this year, we've actually applied for, and we're starting a nonprofit organization that is dedicated at educating the public on childhood obesity and eating disorders. It's because of this and these situations. I'm so happy you guys even brought this up. That's why we're not changing our brand, but we're really redirecting a lot of our focus to start educating the community on proper eating habits, because let's face it, those in the 35 to 55-year-old demographic, it's almost too late for them in a way to make a meaningful change. Now, I'm not saying it's too late, but really what we're imploring them to do is start teaching downstream. Start feeding your children real food. Start teaching them the importance of making real food with homemade ingredients. Now, I'll end on this point. Parents should not be rewarding their son or daughter for coming home with an A+ on their report card or hitting the game-winning home run. They should not reward them by poisoning them with a trip to McDonald's or a candy bar or any sort of fast food, fried food, processed poison. They should not be doing that, because what does that do? It sets a template in that young child's mind of how to reward themselves, what the reward system is. And soon they'll start abusing that, and they'll start abusing their body, deteriorating their health. And as these stats point to right now, they will die younger. What I say is a terrible, horrible death.
No, those are very, very interesting points. We should probably all go by my dad's way of thinking, which is hard work should only be rewarded with more hard work, unfortunately. But
I love your dad.
In all seriousness, there's a real stigma, Mike, attached with being out of shape or fat. You know, a lot of obesity is caused by bad diet and a lack of exercise. However, many people battling obesity, they may have some sort of predisposition or a number of various mental health issues, which makes weight loss not so simple. What do you think about this sort of biggest loser, you're only fat because you're lazy thought process that's, possessed by large numbers of people in society these days?
Well, it's all about progress, and it's about goal setting. Where are you going? Are you making the right decisions today? I like to keep it very clear, very black and white. The next decision you make will take you one step closer or farther from your goal. Now, in our practice, I have a team of dietitians sitting in my office right now. Every day we deal with the general public, people from our local community or abroad contacting us via online and Skype just like this, and we have consultations with them. And so many people come to us with so many excuses as to why they're overweight, as to why they're unhealthy, as to why they're dealing with all these problems. They do not present solutions. They really want us, they know that they need help, but they don't want to admit that it's their fault. Now, you could have some sort of genetic issue that makes it harder to lose weight, but that percentage of the population is infinitely minuscule as compared to those that it's truly a decision, that it's truly as a lack of discipline or dedication or goal setting. It's just simple apathy of their own to allow themselves to be healthy and live the life that they truly deserve. So really, as human beings, we are completely alone on this planet. We are stuck inside our, this sheath of skin and hair that we have on our body. At the end of the day, inside, we are completely alone. Nobody can do this for you. Now, we can be motivated and inspired by the people around us, but nobody can make you eat well. Nobody can make you exercise. Nobody can make you rest properly or manage your levels of stress. You must do that for yourself, and that's what we ask our clients to do. Now, we'll hand them the treasure map on how that has to be done, but we cannot push them, we cannot force them. They must take each step on their own. We will be with them and walk by their side, but again, we cannot do that for them. So everyone out there who makes an excuse as to why they're stuck in the position that they're in, they have to start to move now. Now, you're not going to lose 100 pounds in a day. We shoot for 1 pound at a time. Let's aim for 1 pound this week, and we do that by breaking this up into action steps, by doing everything we can today to achieve that one goal at the end of the week, and then 2 weeks, and then the month, and then a year, and we go on from there.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second, Mike, and just go into a scenario. For example, I'm a middle-aged mom. I'm a bit bigger, and I'm busy with work, and I go to the pool, for example, and people are laughing at me because I'm overweight. People are telling me that I'm fat, that I need to lose weight. And instead of doing what I need to do, all this creates some kind of mental issue for me where I don't eat well. Maybe I don't eat at all. I start throwing up my food. Maybe it starts an issue with food, like a bulimia or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of listeners out there who are going through that because the statistics are huge between males and females who deal with bullying and also negative comments that don't lead to them eating healthier or exercising more, but doing these drastic things that really take a toll on their life. Give them some advice. How do you get out of that rut, and how do you get on the right track? Because that's something that a lot of people deal with these days.
And we do, in our practice, we do deal with young men and women who have eating disorders. And that is a very difficult issue for them to deal with, for their family to deal with. And there's a lot of misinformation out there about what the cause is and what the true remedy is. What we do is we actually try and sit with the individual, the human, and we get to know them and we get to understand what their goal set is, what their challenges are, and what they want out of life. And we ask them to find a point of motivation and focus on that point of motivation. And that could be a lot of people, they just truly, one of the biggest things that we get, people want to be around for their children as they get older. They realize at some point in their 30s, 40s, maybe knocking on 50, holy crap, I got a 8, 10, 15-year-old kid at home. I want to see them graduate high school. I want to see them get married and have kids. That helps a lot of people. The vanity really doesn't motivate a lot of people. I want to have abs. I want to fit in that bikini. That's more of a short term, but that's not really a good anchor for people to hang on. So for the people out there that have some sort of issue that they're battling, we ask, number one, is to find that point of motivation. What truly do they want? Do they need? Are they hoping, looking, wanting in life? And let's focus on that. And the next thing we need to do is find a support system. Who around you will actually care enough to make that walk with you? Who cares enough to give you the tough love and tell you when you're screwing up or give you a big hug when you do something well? And there's a mix of that along the way. Now, my team, we're very well educated and experienced in these situations, and we're happy to be a part of that. But there needs to be closer individuals also. Now, some people, unfortunately, they have the opposite, what we call crabs in the pot. People around them that are just dragging them down, trying to tell them that they're never going to be good. It could be, an insecure spouse, an burdensome parent, all these, people in their life that are just kind of that excess dead weight. And we're able to identify those people and use them as motivation to move our clients forward. So I'm not going to try and diagnose eating disorders on air right now. That would certainly, not be correct protocol. Mm-hmm. But for anyone listening, you need to find motivation, because otherwise you will die. You will die an early, terrible death. Your life will not be fulfilling. You will be a burden on people around you, and that's not fair to you. It's not fair to them. We can all think about in our own families the uncle or the grandparent or the step-parent that had some sort of issue or illness that they just kind of dragged into their later years, and then for the next 10, 15, 20 years sometimes, they're kind of stuck in their bedroom sitting on their couch, where their extended family is now taking care of them. They can't travel to where they want to go because they have to take care of Uncle so-and-so. They can't send the kid to college because a lot of that money was expended taking care of so-and-so. Now, I'm not showing blame. I'm trying to offer points of motivation for people that are listening. Again, we are completely alone and completely responsible for our own success or our own failures. And once people become accountable to that, they start to make a change. And we try and scale this very small. We ask, just do one more thing today better than you did yesterday. Do not recreate the wheel. We're just looking for daily progress each and every day with consistency, and that will build that bridge from where you are now to where you want to be.
I like that. I like how you use the crabs in the pot, the people that are sort of dead weight and negative. I like that you use them as motivation. If it was me and Dennis, we'd probably just ship them off to an island or something like that and eliminate them from the people's lives. But a lot of what you said before about discipline and I guess, bad habits sort of tie into the next subject. We want to ask you about this, Mike. One of your former clients in Johny Hendricks had a big issue with his weight for his last fight against Tyron Woodley. I imagine you wouldn't have been too sort of close to the source, and I don't think you were working with Johny, but, what exactly went wrong from your sort of outside perspective?
I was not working with Johny, though I do care about him as a person. I think he's a great guy. I consider myself still a friend of Johnny's. And I am friends with his coaching staff, or his former coaching staff, one of which is Adrian Ramirez. Adrian recently, he went on the record, I believe, with MMA Junkie, and he kind of added some insight behind the camp that essentially was they got some bad information from another, diet coach or pseudo-nutritionist out there that really knocked Johnny's progress off the rails. They said he was making great progress, started listening to some new guy that wanted to offer advice. All of a sudden, Johnny started gaining weight. He looked terrible in training. That went on for a few weeks, and they tried to get it back together. And, it didn't quite happen. So that's kind of the story I got, behind the scenes from Adrian, some of the stuff that he had said publicly. I don't think it's appropriate for me to really comment on private conversations to get down into detail unless Johnny or Adrian, kind of comes out. But unfortunately with Johnny, he's so talented and he's so goddamn tough, as we've seen in all of his fights. I mean, I think 90% of the world believes Johnny actually won that second fight with Robbie Lawler. I think Robbie Lawler is just an amazing champion. But if you watch that fight and if you score that fight, I mean, Johnny does pretty damn well in that fight. And he was not in the best shape. He said himself, again, not disclosing private information, he was extremely heavy before that fight. I think 218 pounds, came in the camp at 211 pounds for that Robbie 2 fight. We're talking 41 pounds this young man. And, I say young man kind of loosely because he's in his early 30s now. That's a lot of weight for a man to have to lose during training camp and do it in a healthy manner and then go and fight a 5-round fight versus a guy like Robbie. So what happened in the Woodley fight, I think it's some of those old habits really chased him around and he wasn't able to shake them. And that's kind of what brought down the house, as they say, at the end of it. And it was unfortunate because as a fan, I was very excited to watch him go out there and face Woodley. I think that was a great contender fight.
Just quickly on Johnny before we move on, what do you think? Because a lot of people are saying he's better suited for middleweight, that he might not be able to make another cut down to welterweight, that it might be too dangerous for him. From working with him before, do you think he should stay in welterweight, or do you think a move up to middleweight might be good for him?
My personal thought would be for
Yeah.
Johnny to take at least 6 months out of competition and work on his lifestyle. I think if he can take a good 6 month run, redevelop the proper healthy eating habits and rest, recuperation, stress management that he would need to be healthy, I think he'd be an amazing welterweight based upon his structure, his height, his bone density, his limb length, the amount of muscle mass he has on his frame. He's the perfect sized welterweight. He just needs to bring down his overall body weight down. I don't believe he has a proportionate ratio of lean muscle mass to non-functional body weight. And if he's able to reduce that non-functional body weight down to, 10, 12% in the off season and get into that single digit percentage for fight time, I think Johny Hendricks could be unstoppable in the weight class.
I want to switch topics, Mike. Lou Giordano, who's another weight management specialist, made some comments, I believe a few weeks ago, and he claimed, well, one of the things that he claimed is that he basically said that you're a fraud. He said, if I ever charge a client $1,000 a day and they never felt worse, I probably should look for a new profession. Just curious, what do you make of these comments?
It's so funny to see all these pseudo nutritionists and dietitians come out of the woodwork and mention my name or that of the Dolce diet, because they're completely irrelevant in the industry. Nobody writes an article about them unless they mention the Dolce diet. That's their only way to get noticed. So, and this happens to us every day. I have no opinion. I think it's, I know what my team does. Now, mind you, I have a team of registered dietitians on staff in my office. Every meal plan that my team writes is completely vetted by licensed dietitians. Here in the majority of states inside the United States, it is illegal for any individual to prescribe nutrition advice to another human being unless they are licensed by the state and a registered dietitian. So I would certainly put it out there that any athlete listening to someone that is unlicensed, it is like hiring an unlicensed contractor to build a deck on your house. Why would you risk your health in such a situation? Especially, why would you risk your health to someone that's looking for simple clickbait and offering free services? How can you be a professional if you're working for free? Again, I would be very suspicious of individuals like that. And if they are not a registered dietitian, if it's not a team of registered dietitians, I would steer clear of those snake oil salesmen. It's a scary product. Why would you risk your health and your longevity and your career in the hands of an amateur?
Yeah, well, just quickly on Lou, one last question. He also said, I'm pretty sure because of how adamant he was about the IV ban, but most of his clients have used an IV. It's obvious Dolce promotes extreme weight cutting. Just wondering, Mike, what do you think of those comments? Do you promote extreme weight cutting?
Absolutely not. Now, if anyone who follows the Dolce diet knows it is a lifestyle-based approach to health and wellness. We suggest our athletes start cutting weight 52 weeks before competition, what we call a slow burn. Our athletes have a ceiling of 12% body fat in the offseason. Now, you can look at Thiago Alves, who now walks around so light, he wants to drop to lightweight. He was one of the biggest welterweights in the world on the Dolce diet. He's now one of the lightest. You look at Mirsad Bektic, who is a rising star inside the UFC, who walks around very close to his competition weight, makes weight. And now Thiago and Mirsad, I must say, they both make weight the night before weigh-ins. They have dinner that night. They have breakfast that morning. They step on the scale without sweating or dripping a single ounce. You can look at Ronda Rousey, never used an IV in her entire competitive career. Manny Gamburyan, who fought at 170 pounds, then 155, fought Jose Aldo for the WEC world title at 145. And then now he's fighting at 135 pounds on the Dolce diet, only cuts 2 pounds the day of competition. Or Stephen Ray over in the UK, another Dolce diet subject, 3-0 inside the UFC, no IV needed when he fought over there in Scotland recently, made weight perfectly, and looked dominant in his fight. So we can talk about this on and on. Unfortunately, you get people out there that they're just simply looking for clickbait. They're finding reasons to mention the Dolce diet to get some sort of notoriety for their little, possibility of fame inside the industry. And again, it's sad. You never hear me say anything bad about anybody. Have you? That's not the way we promote. Now, again, we only work with 8 athletes per year because we don't dilute our services. We make sure that each one of our athletes has all the attention that they need. And a lot of the other pseudo coaches out there, they're just throwing shit against the wall. They're just trying to, a lot of these guys, unfortunately, they get paid in tweets. That is not a professional, ladies and gentlemen. That's scary. Now, you can walk into my office any day and you can sit down with one of my registered dietitians and you can determine whether or not what we do is legitimate, and absolutely you will. Now, our lead dietitian, I'll go further, Samantha Coogan, has her Master's of Science in Exercise Physiology, a registered dietitian, and she also teaches nutrition at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Who has a more credentialed team than the Dolce diet? I challenge anybody to find someone more credentialed than my team.
Samantha Coogan getting it done. Now, Mike, we had a chat with Gunnar Nelson a few weeks ago, and he thinks the weighing system is flawed and shouldn't give fighters an opportunity to make these massive weight cuts. I understand, obviously, with the Dolce diet, guys aren't necessarily cutting all that much, but you do get other fighters cutting, say, 20, 30 pounds, and I guess his whole point was about by the time fight night comes, you can have a welterweight, instead of fighting 170, they may be fighting at, 185 or 200. If the weigh-ins were on the day or after the fight, fighters would have no choice but to fight near their natural weights. What do you think about this concept?
In a perfect world, that would be true. And I had a great conversation with Jeff Nowitzki while in Melbourne. We had multiple conversations on this issue, trying to understand what's the best possible outcome for fighter health and safety. Would it be a day of weigh-ins? Now let's think about this. You look at NCAA wrestling. How healthy are these guys when they compete day of weigh-ins? Not at all. They're cutting weight all the way up until that morning, completely dehydrated. And the only saving factor is the guy staring at them on the other side of the mat did the same damn thing. When you throw tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars into the pot, these athletes will take unnecessary risks to gain an advantage. This is human nature. So let's talk about the world as it really is, not as how we wish it should be. Now, that's a tough subject. Should you do hydration testing? Any high school wrestler right now can cheat a hydration test easily. They have the IP, the understanding to do that. They're learning from their college coaches how to cheat a hydration test. So hydration testing and weight certification, well, that doesn't really matter. The day of weigh-in, does that help? Yeah, it is a little bit better, but we know the fluid sac around the brain will not completely restore itself within 24 hours. So this is one of the conversations Jeff and I had. So fighter safety is definitely at a risk, even with a 24-hour weigh-in. So what's the next best method? It could be a 48-hour weigh-in if we're only concerned about the health and safety of the athlete. Does that allow for unfair advantages if one athlete's cutting 20 or 30 pounds and another athlete who's only cutting 10 pounds? That's very possible. So there's many aspects of this one conversation. Now, I am not the man to tell you exactly how it should be done, but I do believe, based upon our experience and our knowledge of the science, that we should have a voice in this conversation. So the conversation with Jeff and myself is continuing. He's speaking with Andy Foster at length here recently. I know all the heads of the major commissions are allowing it, but what we also need to remember is that the IV ban was not as a result of weight cutting, which is legally sanctioned by every major athletic commission. The IV ban only came into effect as a deterrent for performance-enhancing drugs. And a lot of times people make the correlation between the IV ban and weight cutting, but that's not the case. It was only brought in to diffuse the PED situation, which is excellent, but it created a much bigger monster as a result of the weight cuts. So more people need to get involved in this conversation. I believe they need to have neurologists involved in this conversation to really determine the long-term effects of traumatic brain injury in a dehydrated athlete. That's the biggest concern that we have as we look at all the data. What will happen to the athlete that gets kicked in the skull 24 minutes into a 25-minute fight after being just 3% dehydrated? Now, 3% dehydration on a 200-pound athlete is only 6 pounds. All of the credible data shows extreme negative side effects of just a 3% level of dehydration. So this would not be considered extreme weight cutting.
Wow.
Wow,
Now,
this
this
is
isn't part of the conversation, but it should be. And this is what my team does every day. Every day we spend time going through all the literature out there, trying to come up with the answer. We're still looking for it.
Wow, that's some crazy stuff, Mike. Some insight brought into the interview. Let me switch topics to UFC 193 quickly, and let's talk about Ronda Rousey. Prior to her fight, UFC 193 at the weigh-in, some media members and fans thought she looked a little bit out of shape. Obviously, you were working very closely with her. What did you make of those comments?
It's so funny to hear people make comments when they're sitting outside looking through the lens of another individual, and they make comments about teams and camps and athletes and such. What they're not doing is not saying Holly Holm did an amazing job. I think that's the real story here. Holly Holm did an amazing job in that fight. She had a great team, a great game plan. She was well prepared for the version of Ronda Rousey that showed up to compete that night. Now, Ronda was in excellent shape. She had an amazing training camp. There were no discernible changes to her meal plan or her weight cut. She was actually 2 pounds lighter this fight week than she was the fight week versus Bethe Correia. So you could pull back and look at the data points. The data points show that Ronda should have had a much better performance. But what the variable is Holly Holm. Holly Holm did a great job on that night. And it's unfortunate to see, but this is the current climate that we live in right now, nationally, globally, specifically within this little microcosm of mixed martial arts. People only look for negative. If it bleeds, it leads. And that story certainly sells, as we can see with all the clickbait headlines out there with very little actual context inside the article. So this is what people are trying to hang their hat on, but nobody's really talking about the great job that Holly did. Mm-hmm. Holly was 47-3 going into this fight with Ronda Rousey. She had 4 times the combat experience that Ronda Rousey had going into this fight. Nobody talked about that. Now, I actually did that in a video interview going back 8 to 10 weeks ago for MMA Junkie. And I said, Holly Holm is legit. She is real, and she's probably the toughest competitor Ronda ever faced for the exact same reasons that we saw. This lady knows how to control the distance. She's very accurate with her striking. She can win ugly or she can win pretty, but this girl knows how to win. 47 victories to only 3 defeats. That's a serious young lady right there, and she did a great job on that night.
For sure, and we've definitely talked at length in the past and after the fight about Holly Holm's amazing victory. Got to ask you, as a big part of the team, obviously Team Rousey, you're obviously close with Edmond. He's gotten a lot of flack for his game plan or lack thereof from a lot of people's perspective. And also his advice in between rounds 1 and 2 in the fight. Do you think Ronda's game plan for Holly Holm was flawed going into this fight? What did you make of the advice Edmond offered her in between rounds? What's your take on it, Mike?
Unfortunately, I was cage side, so I didn't hear the communication in the corner. So I would have to actually go back and watch my DVR and hear exactly what was said. Now, game plan wise, I know Ronda was out there and she was clearly trying to outbox a boxer. Well, that's an uphill battle for sure. But we can see Ronda had the power to knock out Bethe Correia, who was also undefeated inside the UFC with some TKO finishes, primarily known as a striker. I think Holly Holm's level of striking, though, was far superior to that of Bette's, and that might not have been taken into consideration moving forward. That might not have been properly vetted as part of the training camp, but who knows how that goes? I mean, like Mike Tyson says, every game plan goes out the window when you get punched in the face. I'm paraphrasing. And I believe that's a little part of what happened also. Once you step in there, that cage door shuts. All of a sudden, game plan is gone. Now you're in a fist fight. And Ronda was certainly in a fist fight that night with a great athlete.
A lot of people are sort of wondering if Ronda and Edmond are going to stick together after the whole strategy and the way things planned out. You obviously close to both of them. Do you think there's a chance that Ronda might switch camps for her next fight?
I can't speak on Ronda's behalf nor on Edmond's behalf with that. I know that they are very close as friends, also as coach and athlete. They have a great working relationship, what I've been blessed to be a part of for almost 3 years now. What I can say is Ronda was 12-0 going into that fight with Edmond on her coaching staff. And that needs to be considered also. She was 12-0, considered the most dominant athlete on the planet last year. And Edmond was part of that coaching staff. So again, we have to look at the whole picture and really appreciate the good work that they did alongside of the learning experiences that they had at UFC 193 in Melbourne. So I think that they're probably going to sit down in a private room over a cup of coffee and have a good conversation on what's best for Ronda as an athlete moving forward, and I will hear about that probably just before you guys do. I don't have any influence on that conversation, and I'm sure the right decision will be made.
Before we wrap up, just want to get a little bit of sort of insight. Bruce Buffer made some comments recently, Mike, that he believes Hollywood and Ronda Rousey's press obligations distracted Ronda from her training, and it was the ultimate cause of what happened. I mean, from everything that we've seen, she's been incredibly focused and hasn't really been an issue. What do you think about that? You mentioned a lot of people aren't giving Holly Holm enough credit, but do you think there's a part of, Ronda Rousey where her hectic schedule, I guess, took her attention away from, not to say the fight, but just, I guess, life in general?
I wouldn't be able to get inside her head and say definitively yes or no, but from an outside perspective, I do not know how she has been able to do so much for so long at such an elite level. Now, I'm with her every day, all day. At 5 a.m., we're awake. And there's someone knocking on her door for hair and makeup. At 6:30 in the morning, we're in a vehicle traveling all over whatever the fight city is. She's doing phone interviews while she's in the car driving to do more interviews. And, when these interviews there, it's an all-day process. Now she has to mix in her training on top of that and all the fight PR. There is no athlete in the sport of MMA that has more media or has to perform more media than Ronda Rousey. So she's truly handicapped moving into any event because of her crazy, crazy schedule that none of her competitors have. Her competitors maybe have 20% of the media that Ronda has leading up to these fights. So is that a disadvantage for her? Absolutely. Does that have a negative effect on her? I could not honestly say because she's never communicated that. She seems to embrace it. Now, Ronda, during her open workout, she was there for an additional 2 hours when the cameras went off, signing every autograph and taking every photograph with every fan that wanted one. That's why the people love Ronda and why she's so popular. Now, me as a coach, I'm trying to pull her out of there saying, champ, let's go. You need to go home and rest. And she said, no, I got to sign these autographs. These people came all the way here to get an autograph, to get her photograph, and I'm not leaving until I do that for them. So that needs to be considered. God, this girl, she works so hard. And let's not forget, she's still a young lady. I mean, she's a 27-year-old girl that's dealing with all of this, all the chaos that's swirling around her right now, where 3, 4, 5 years ago, she wasn't. She was living in a car. So put yourself in that situation to really understand the life of Ronda Rousey and what she needs to deal with, and think, how well would you do in that situation? I know people that go to a 9-to-5 job, and, they have to, drop their kid off at school before work, and they get freaked out. It ruins the rest of their day because they're running behind schedule. Well, that's nothing compared to the life that this young lady has to live.
Yeah, Mike's not over-exaggerating. Me and Casper were there on hand for all her Melbourne stuff, and she hung around and signed a hell of a lot of autographs. It was very, very impressive. Finally, Mike, we're going to let you go on this question. It looks like there will be a rematch with Holm at UFC 200 in July. Let me ask you, can Ronda beat Holm and win her title back? And if so, how do you think she does it?
Absolutely. Ronda Rousey can beat any 135-pound female fighter on the planet. How does she do it? Who knows? Again, once that cage door shuts, then it becomes a fight. I think Ronda's bread and butter, of course, is inside the grappling range, although she has the power to knock anybody out at a moment's notice. Holly has shown to be an exceptional striker with a great game plan, great strategy, and gauge of distance. So this is a great fight. I think it's an amazing rematch moving forward. Of course, I predict Ronda will be dominant, and I think Ronda will be extremely dominant in a rematch, but she's going to have to work every single day of these next 6 months or so until she steps inside there.
Well, there you go, guys. Make sure to follow Mike Dolce on Twitter at The Dolce Diet. Find out more information about how you can start the Dolce Diet today at thedolcediet.com. Mike, we just want to say thank you so much for all the tremendous insight. It was great having you on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. I really do appreciate it.